Welcome to the Chatty Flutist, a podcast where I share my thoughts on music, practicing, auditioning, and navigating life as a musician. With performances across the Washington, D.C. and New York City metro areas, I'll take you behind the scenes of my career as an orchestral musician, chamber artist, soloist, and freelancer. Whether you're a seasoned musician or simply curious about the life of a performer, join me for candid conversations, tips, and a bit of fun along the way. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a flutist and doctoral student. I am the principal piccolo for the Northern Neck Orchestra, and I freelance in the areas around DC and New York. I want this podcast to be a space where we can discuss matters of musicianship, practicing, flute playing, resilience, life, and much more. I very much appreciate you tuning in and hope we can build a community of support and encouragement through honest conversations about hard things we all experience. Today, I wanted to share a few things that have not only changed my level of confidence as a flutist and player, but also has helped me advance at many auditions. Many of these things I personally believe were the impetus to me starting to reliably and continuously advance at these crazy bursts of insanity we call auditions. As many of us know, auditions are so unbelievably unpredictable and elusive many times. We are just figuring this whole thing out as we go, faking it until we're making it in every area of our lives. If you don't agree, I want to know your secrets. As far as it concerns me, I feel like I'm continuously making things up and figuring it out. Today, I would love to share with you 10 things that revolutionized my confidence in auditioning and performing. Taking auditions was always a completely daunting task for me. I always felt so out of my depth and inadequate. Many times, I still do. In this episode, I discuss some ideas and techniques that have taken my auditioning and performing in general to a new level. Whereas I used to feel woefully unprepared, I now know I can enter the hall on audition day completely confident that I will deliver regardless of the result. Number 1. One aspect of taking auditions that really changed my perspective on this whole daunting process is an idea that my friend Jane gave me. She told me one day that if the panel is looking for the best color blue that day, but you are bringing to the table a wonderful, vibrant lime green, it doesn't matter how great of a lime green you are that day, it is still not the blue they're looking for. This helped me reframe the whole context of auditions. Instead of viewing auditioning as a test of my mettle and skill, I can instead think of the process as a situation in which I bring a valid interpretation of these excerpts and where I can deliver the best performance I can give that day. If it's the right day and the right time, spin the wheel, lime green. Now on to the practical with number 2. Everyone talks about performance psychology books, and I can't even count how many I have read at this point, being both an avid reader and an active auditioner. Everyone has a personal favorite, so I always recommend people read a few that are highly recommended, but Zen Golf by Dr. Joseph Parent happens to be my personal favorite. Let me read you a passage from this book, which is speaking about intrusive thoughts. The mind is like a high-spirited wild horse. If you try to control it by locking it up, it will be agitated and restless. If you try to force it to be still, it will kick and fight even more. Take a bigger view of control. Within the big meadow of awareness, let the wild horse of your mind run here and there. With nothing to struggle against, it will eventually settle down on its own. When it has settled, you can tame it. When it is tame, you can train it. Then you can ride this horse of your mind, and it will swiftly take you wherever you want to go. This particular passage has really helped me recognize that I can accept any thoughts that are occurring and don't have to try so hard to shoo them away, thus draining even more of my precious mental energy during a performance. And I certainly don't have to feel bad about their existence. They can just happen in my periphery while I enjoy the rest of the experience. These thoughts can, and always will, exist while we are nervous and doing hard things, but they don't need our direct attention. On to number 3, practicing when preparing for an audition. Something my teachers have instilled in me is being very systematic with preparation in the practice room. This includes many things like making charts and introducing different techniques for preparing for an upcoming audition. There are many more resources where you can find lots of these things, where people much more qualified than I am have shared much better ways of preparing. I plan to discuss in a future episode my own system of audition preparation that I have devised with years of expert input, as well as by accumulating a stockpile of rejections and some victories by trial and error. Stay tuned for that if you're interested in the details. Being systematic in my preparation has helped me not only feel more confident, but I now know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing in the practice room, and I can see physically that it is being accomplished. So I can go into the audition with full confidence, knowing that I did my very best and did all I can do in my preparation. Another thing to remember is that taking auditions can feel so all-encompassing, and many people believe in not seeing too many of their friends or family during this time. While it does take an immense amount of mental and physical energy and time to be well prepared for an audition, I also want to encourage anyone out there not to get stuck in a hole of isolation. It is so easy to self-isolate and become extremely burnt out. This is actually the time when I'm really intentional about when I plan my practice and when I plan time with friends. There are so many times when I schedule days to either play for people or have good friends come over and read duets with me after I've practiced my whole system for that day. I can be at peace knowing that I've accomplished my practicing for that day and have the freedom to have some friends over for dinner. This is something else that I love to do, hosting and cooking for people I love. If I'm doing my systematic routine each day, I can feel free of guilt in sharing a meal with a friend. I think it's really important to lean on our support system during the weeks leading up to an audition because it can feel like your whole life is closing in around you. There are so many people who love you and want to see you succeed. Hiding away from them is not going to help you in the practice room or on stage. While keeping all this in mind, it is important to note that I will try to remain focused and cling closely to my schedule during the 6 weeks leading up to an audition. I try not to travel in those 6 weeks prior, and I try not to overschedule my social calendar. I also schedule some times when I'm alone and resting, which I protect ardently. However, I do not let that extend to distancing myself from family and friends. People are always my priority, and a life well lived includes so much more than winning a job. Another great quote from Zen Golf is as follows: "For an activity to be fruitful, it must be good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end." Another technique that has really helped me in preparing for an audition is to learn some standard repertoire while I'm preparing the list. This always feels a little overwhelming because we think we need to be dedicating all of ourselves to just these excerpts, and we are most times intent on winning the job. But without some extra musical context, it's easy to forget that these tiny Olympic events that are orchestral excerpts are actually music. I also just feel like when I'm learning repertoire or doing a recital or a competition at the same time as an audition, I'm always in much better shape. Sometimes I will purposefully schedule a competition or a recital around the same time as an audition. I appreciate that this may be a controversial bit of advice. This is not the right idea for everybody listening, but whenever possible, I try my best to do at least one piece of additional repertoire outside of my audition because it really does keep me in excellent shape. It keeps my musical mind open and my creativity and problem-solving juices flowing. Number 6, I love having a useful warm-up routine. The wonderful DSO flutist and audition coach Sharon Sparrow shares this idea in her book, 6 Weeks to Finals. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. The concept of having a useful warm-up routine incorporates difficult aspects of many of the excerpts you plan to play on a given day. I think this is extremely helpful, and I personally like to add things that help me feel in tip-top shape that are specific to areas that I'd like to refine in my playing. We are always refining. This is something that can help us feel excited. Music is a lifelong learning pursuit, and you will never reach the glass ceiling if you keep working. There is no limit to our endless refinement, so instead of taking that as a daunting task, take it as a beautiful challenge. See how much you can grow and be in competition with yourself alone and just enjoy the journey. On to number 7. I just alluded a bit to comparison, which is something I very much want to stress. When I'm preparing for an audition, I try to delete from my phone all social media, and I try to be intentional about not checking it on my computer either. I find personally that seeing friends and colleagues and acquaintances and maybe even people I don't know get the gigs that I wish I could have makes me feel inadequate, unprepared, and like these opportunities could never happen to me. The little green monster rears its ugly head, so to set myself up for success, I remove from myself as much distraction and temptation as possible. I try to keep in mind that social media is a highlight reel at all times and makes others' lives look much better than they are. Everyone on the internet seems like they're getting much more work than they really are, and people are playing more often than they are on their social media, myself included. This is an unintentional consequence of the digital age. In our effort to connect with the world around us, we inadvertently become jealous or make others green with envy. This is something I'm constantly battling against, so deleting my social media from my phone, especially before an audition, is an important step to keep myself from derailing mid-process. Number 8 is immensely practical and detailed. It has changed the game for me in auditions more than perhaps any of these other ideas. It is having a very clearly defined pre-shot routine. To quote Zen Goff again, the ideal state of mind for action is confident, focused, and in the flow, with body and mind synchronized to the present moment. Turn over control of the shot from your thinking mind to the intuitive mind that runs your body. Stay in the present and trust your swing. Take care of the process and the results will take care of themselves. If you can look past all of the golf lingo, this totally applies to us when taking an audition. I find that if I know and can execute the same way each time a perfectly planned pre-excerpt routine for each excerpt that is unique to each excerpt, I know intuitively what's going to come out of my instrument, and it's going to be the same every time. This doesn't mean I never make a mistake. Of course I do. But by and large, having a clearly defined and well-practiced pre-shot routine that is unique to each excerpt increases my consistency by a long shot. For example, my excerpts always include a bit of rhythmic breathing before I start while simultaneously hearing the orchestra accompaniment. I always hear the same part of the accompaniment, and I always breathe in the same exact way. I breathe in a way that's appropriate for the music and in time with the bit of music I'm about to play. I practice this rhythmic breathing routine relentlessly, isolating entrances and performing them so that I know exactly in my inner ear what's going to come out of my instrument and is solidified to the point where I'm not going to struggle when it comes to starting each excerpt. Sometimes I also imagine the cue of a conductor. Whatever works for you is correct. It takes a lot of auditions, a lot of experimenting, and a lot of mocks for a lot of people to really refine this process. This way of being systematic has increased my confidence more than I could have ever imagined it would, and is my favorite technique on this list. On to number 9. As many of you may know, when you're in an audition, you are in performance mode rather than practice mode. This is an important concept to learn that Noah Kageyama of the Bulletproof Musician discusses in great detail on his blog and in his podcast. By the time we get to the hall on audition day, it's too late to refine our excerpts. We are now relying on our body and our ears to sort of autopilot up to the level of our preparation. The thinking mind takes a back seat here. To quote again Dr. Parent, "The intuitive mind functions as bare awareness. It gathers the experiences of the senses without adding concepts or judgments. Because intuitive mind is non-conceptual, it is never in the past or future, but always present and always connected to the body. How can giving up control lead to getting control? Have you ever hit a shot when it felt like you weren't running the swing, when it felt almost effortless with no thoughts about how to swing the club or trying to make it come out a particular way? Most golfers have, if only rarely, had that experience. The results usually range from great to spectacular, and it illustrates how effective it is to give up control. It feels as if we've given up control because we tend to identify with our thinking mind. However, we haven't actually lost control, we've just transferred it. Here is the point. You don't need to consciously direct your body for it to hit a target accurately. Consciously thinking about how you perform a physical activity interferes with doing it naturally and accurately. That's what we mean by being self-conscious about how we are performing. When we're in the audition room or on the stage in the hall, we want to make sure that we are not in practice mode anymore. These targeted pre-shot routines help me let go and let the ball fly, so to speak. You are free and have permission not to analyze in the audition room. Often when I come out of an audition and people ask how I played, I can only say that I felt like I autopiloted well. I don't even know most times. I'm not in practice mode at that point. I'm freed from pressure this way and have much more fun. Now to number 10. We have reached the end of my list. This one is a personal anecdote from my undergraduate flute professor, Judy Mendenhall. Judy used to tell me that life in music was like a big jar. We fill this jar over many years with lots of no's, rejections, the dreaded thank you before you've finished playing the round, and a plethora of other disappointments. Until you've filled your jar, named grit and resilience, you won't receive your great yeses. When you look at the immensely successful musicians with wonderful careers, they each have an iceberg worth of no beneath the surface. The portion of this person's career we can actually see is a relatively small portion of the yeses that fill their jars. It is not a worth-defining measure, and our self-worth absolutely cannot come from our yeses, which are totally out of our control. Another of my beloved teachers, Bonnie Boyd, once told me, "Orchestras want to hire someone. Why not you?" Thank you so much for listening if you've made it this far. I hope these pearls of wisdom I have been given by many great musicians, as well as some gems I've discovered myself through much digging and time, benefit you in your preparation and performance. I am so grateful for your attention, and I hope you return to the Chatty Flutist for future episodes. Happy practicing! If you'd like to learn more, please visit my website, jenniferzaboflute.com, or follow me on Instagram @jenflutes.